Number 5. A weird signal from the Milky Way. Astronomers have been studying fast radio bursts, or FRBs, that's a little acronym there to make me sound smart, for decades outside of our galaxy in the hopes of someday making some contact with our extraterrestrial friends and saying hello. Well, decades of research might have paid off when on April 28th, 2020, 2 ground-based radio telescopes discovered an intense pulse of radio waves within the Milky Way. This event was the first time an FRB had ever been detected within the galaxy, and somehow, despite this burst only lasting for a millisecond, it was apparently almost impossible to miss. I know what all of these words mean for sure. The burst was 30,000 light years away from Earth, so, about a stone's throw up that way, really just a block away on the cosmic scale. It was first discovered by the CHIME, a fancy acronym for the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, as well as another project, the STARE, the Survey for Transient Astronomical Radio Emission. I just woke up, man, and I don't really know what these acronyms mean either, but I'm having a lot of fun saying them for you, and I hope you enjoy that. This discovery was notable as well for being the most energetic radio blast these astronomers have ever seen, but it was also one of the closest. Usually when we're talking about radio frequencies all the way up in space, these things are like billions of years of light years away, which does not make them particularly easy to study. You're getting a real far away glance. But if there's one on our doorstep, way easier to focus on. So what is this weird signal coming out of the Milky Way? Is this aliens trying to send a text and the reception's a bit foggy? Here's the trouble. Astronomers don't know for sure just yet. 3 years later, we are still not 100%. There is a small possibility, a disappointing one, that this signal could be man-made somehow and it's broadcasting all the way out here. But if not, this could very well be a promising sign of life from across the galaxy. And if you're looking for more alien content, we have got more UFO sightings than probably any other YouTube channel on this site, and I'm pretty sure of that. But if space stuff ain't your jam, we got cryptids, monsters, mythologies, true crime, fake crime, stories too good to be true and too true to be good. So click through, stay subscribed, stay screaming, and stay watching this video, okay? All the way to the end. I got a little surprise for you, I promise. Alright, moving on. Number 4, the sounds of Ganymede. Have you ever heard a planet talk? I don't mean like going for a hike and communing with trees and talking to nature or anything like that, man, okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally hearing the sounds a planet produces. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I am not a rocket scientist. I'm barely even a YouTube host. But as I understand, when Juno, a NASA satellite, was orbiting Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons, NASA discovered that Ganymede had its own magnetosphere. Ganymede was radiating this strange plasma wave of energy that, when is recorded and played back, sounds absolutely terrifying. This really tickles the H.P. Lovecraft fan in my heart to be able to hear the sounds a planet is making out in the cosmos. So we're gonna play it for you now. Just take a listen to the audio of this and try to ever sleep again. I dare you. I found that pretty scary personally. I don't know, reminds me of my insignificance in the galaxy. But more than a few people on YouTube pointed out, if you just close your eyes and imagine that that's R2-D2 making all of those noises, it's not particularly scary at all. And I'm probably never gonna be able to unhear that. So is this proof of alien life hiding out inside of Jupiter's moon? Well, not quite. This is a natural phenomenon. It's definitely mysterious though, and it makes you think about the size of the cosmos and how small we are on a galactic scale, but other than that, this thing coming from Ganymede is explainable, if not a little bit confusing. I just wanted to toss it smack dab in the middle of this list about alien speculation to keep things a little fun, fresh, and flirty for everybody. Number 3, the USS Jellyfish. That's a fun name, isn't it? That's kind of fun. The USS Jellyfish kind of calls to mind a big ship, maybe a cruise ship, taking an all-included trip through the Bahamas. Well, not to burst your dreams of an island getaway, but the actual USS Jellyfish is a celestial object that astronomers have found that has had them asking questions that are really stinging. That was forced. That was really forced. That was not natural at all. I'm sorry. The USS Jellyfish is a giant mass of plasma that has taken the shape of a jellyfish. At least that's the best way way we can see it. It's kind of like an ink blot test. You see what you want to see. It's some 300 million light years away and is a fancy radio signal called a polyphoenix, which is a term scientists use for a radio frequency up in space that they don't really have all the answers about. The giant blob in particular is so unusual that when astronomers initially discovered it, they were writing it off completely, assuming it was an accident or an error in their data. The researcher who first discovered it, one Torrance Hodgson, captured the subject in 2017 using the Murchison Wide Array, an incredibly powerful Australian ground telescope. And when he wrote on the subject, he told his colleagues, ignore the obvious bug in this data. And it was only when they were really pushing that they began to notice there was something more to it than these formal studies earlier suggested. Now, I'm gonna be honest, the full-scale implications of the space jellyfish are a little bit above my pay grade. I can kind of just look at it and be like, well, that's kind of weird. I can read to you the scientists, theories for what they think created the jellyfish, but just know I only kind of half know what I'm talking about here. Scientists believe that the jellyfish was formed over the course of 2 billion years, structured smack dab in the middle between two galaxies that have been spewing out enormous amounts of light and plasma due to intense interactions between black holes and any materials that end up falling around them, eventually creating one gigantic cosmic jellyfish floating around in the astral planes. Number 2, something unusual. Recently, a team of astronomers discovered something unusual while they were mapping out the universe, which is my favorite start to a point I have ever read on this channel. You guys know when you're mapping out the universe, then you accidentally see something unusual? Ugh, I absolutely hate when that happens. Anyway, this mysterious unusual object floats about 4,000 light years away, very close by. You can practically wave and see it, and it's pulsing strange bursts of energy out of it roughly every 20 minutes on the dot. You can set your watch to this. Somebody up in space forget to turn the oven timer off? Natasha Hurley Walker is an astrophysicist from the Curtin University in Australia, same university that discovered that jellyfish coincidentally, and was the leading researcher on this study. She said in a public statement that this object was appearing and disappearing over a few hours during our observations, and said that it was completely unexpected. It was kind of spooky for an astronomer because there's nothing known in the sky that does that. Let me take over for a second right here and tell you right now, on Top 5 Scary, if you can't tell what something weird is in the sky, it's an alien. Okay? You got an alien on your hands. So we have to assume that's what's going on here. Alongside this bizarre cosmic alarm clock, the team discovered a fossil plasma source, something that was created by powerful blasts of a bygone black hole that has since faded into the darkness. And I loved saying that. A black hole that has faded into the darkness? That's poetic. Does that not sound like where the heart of cosmic evil in the universe would be? Does that not sound a little bit like it's something out of a Lovecraft or Stephen King book? A fossilized plasma created by the blast of a black hole that has faded into the darkness? That sounds like something a guy in a black robe would read out as part of a prophecy for the end of the universe. And number 1, Proxima Centauri. If there was ever going to be concrete signs of alien life, I think it would definitely come from a place called Proxima Centauri. Listen to that. That already sounds like it's from a great Deep Space Nine episode. Recently, astronomers exploring for signs of life beyond Earth discovered a currently unexplained radio signal that was broadcasting from Proxima Centauri, a small red star roughly 4.2 million light years away. That's right next door, man. If this wasn't exciting enough for you, there's radio signals coming from a strange star that no one can explain seemingly. And surrounding these stars is a planet that NASA believes has a temperate and rocky surface just like our beautiful Earth, leading to some wild speculation all around. The project is dubbed Breakthrough Listen, very cool code name, and it was a decade-long search for alien broadcasts from the nearest million stars, just in case anybody's been trying to reach us about our planet's extended warranty. This radio signal in question has been formally dubbed BLC-1 when referred to scientifically. Now, this signal was first discovered in May 2019. It's not quite the be-all and end-all proof of aliens just yet, as much as I want it to be. Sophia Sheik, the team member leading Breakthrough Listen, says she suspects that the broadcast could end up being human in origin somehow, theorizing that it could be something as simple as a plane traveling overhead their equipment, or faulty electronics somewhere getting wires tangled. Would that not be beyond embarrassing if you're a group of scientists, astronomers, and you think you've found proof of alien life, but all it is somebody forgot forgot to take their phone off airplane mode and they've just been getting notifications for Candy Crush and it's messing with your equipment. Still, it's something to research, and it's still one of the most exciting things to happen in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in a long time. And I hope we keep looking for extraterrestrial intelligence out there, because there sure ain't anybody down here. I messed up that joke. Up. Number 5. The Barney and Betty Hill incident. The case of Barney and Betty Hill has puzzled UFO enthusiasts for generations and is considered one of the most well-documented, well-discussed UFO abduction stories, and also President Obama's favorite. He's making a documentary on it. In 1961, a young couple, Betty and Barney Hill, were driving home through New Hampshire when they saw a bright light flying through the sky. 2 hours later, they found themselves back in their driveway without knowing what had happened, confused, shocked, and afraid. The couple claimed that they traveled to a star system 39 light years from Earth, Zeta Reticuli. Before this point, there weren't really many widespread stories of abductions in the United States, so this story caught on wildly. As they were driving home, the couple noticed something bright in the sky. Feeling dizzy and drowsy, the two of them found themselves asleep and waking up in their driveway, completely lost as to how they got there. When they'd awoken, Betty was convinced that they'd experienced a close encounter and went to Air Force to report their sightings. They would spend the next 2 years explaining their case to various government officials and medical professionals. Mr. Barney Hill would go on to recount to a psychiatrist that he was having nightmarish, repetitive dreams. He would recall these creatures with slanted eyes and gray skins that took them on board and experimented on them by taking samples of their flesh and hair. The two underwent hypnosis therapy from a licensed psychologist in hopes to uncover what they could have experienced and repressed. And shockingly, Betty Hill was able to draw a map of the stars seemingly from memory, a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli. The map was nearly spot on, a near perfect recreation of the stars surrounding the actual solar system. This event would end up leading to the Air Force launching Project Blue Book, the clandestine program to research UFO and abduction stories and investigate just what's out there. And if you're looking for more UFO content, even stuff on Project Blue Book, we've got all of that and then some. Come take a look through at all the declassified files, stories of abductions, sightings, close encounters, and way more. So stay subscribed, stay scared, but more importantly, stay watching this video. I worked hard on it. We got lots more abduction stories coming up for you in just a second. Number 4. Terrell Copeland. For some, too many abduction stories come from a disreputable source, you know? Well, our next story comes from a former United States Marine, Terrell Copeland, a man who'd seen the brink and back and had never been shook like this before in his life. Pop those ears open and take a listen. Copeland reported this in 2007. He was living in his Virginia apartment when he saw an orb of white light across the street and hovering in the air, some 300 meters above the ground and changing colors rapidly. Now, Terrell had the same reaction most people like you and I might have seeing a glowing, colorful disco ball in the sky, and he thought, well, that's kind of weird, something's wrong. So he recorded it, posted footage online, and claims this is where his life took a dark turn. He was taking a nap in his apartment, and he said it sounded as if someone was breaking in. He called out into the darkness, asking who was invading his space, and he saw the doorknob move and heard scratching at his door. He grabbed a firearm that he kept in his apartment and went to go ready it, but found himself completely frozen, unable to move no matter how bad he wanted to. He claims he heard a voice that spoke to him, internally, as if it was his own thoughts, saying, "You don't need to do that. We won't harm you." I'm pretty sure if I heard that from inside my head, I would leap out my window just to be safe and take my chances somersaulting down the road, because I'm probably safer there. Now, doctors thought this incident was sleep paralysis, a condition in which one can experience vivid auditory and visual hallucinations during a period of insomnia and even freeze up. But Copeland would complain of hours missing that he couldn't remember. He said there was a span of about 4 hours over the course of 2 nights that he couldn't remember a single second of. So Copeland began to keep notes and sketches of his memories as he started to have these blocked memories resurfacing. He claimed that he saw a person with an elongated skull and pitch black eyes, and said he had a vivid memory of standing on a balcony waving at a cylinder-shaped ship. On a positive note for all of this, Copeland says that he doesn't believe this incident has haunted him, but feels that it's made him a better person and asking more questions, and it's definitely given him a story to tell at parties. Number 3. Fredrick Valentich. Fredrick Valentich was an Australian pilot. He was well trained, and he was an avid enthusiast of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Lucky for him, he might have seen one. Sadly for him, it was the last time anyone saw him. It was 1978, and Fredrick disappeared over his 125 nautical mile training flight over the Australian mainland. While at 4,500 feet in the air, Valentich reported that there was an unidentifiable craft following behind him. Melbourne Flight Services insisted that there wasn't any other aircraft in the space with him, but Fredrick replied back, "No, there's something on my tail." He described it as glowing with 4 repeating bright lights and rushing past him. Valentich said it was shiny, metallic, and chrome, and he was on radio with air control for 5 minutes before he started mysteriously experiencing engine trouble. The flight controller asked him again what was following him. Valentich responded, "It's hovering and it is not an aircraft." And this was the last thing anyone ever heard from Fredrick Valentich. Authorities were completely unable to recover his craft, and after an intense search, threw their shoulders up at a loss. A local farmer alleged that he had seen a strange flying object in the sky the same day as Valentich's disappearance. The farmer went on to explain that he claims he saw the plane attached to this UFO. He told officials that he was scared to tell anyone about what he had seen for fear he would be the town laughingstock if he was a farmer raving about a UFO. Tragically, in the end, we're no closer to understanding what happened to Fredrick now than we were all those years ago in 1978. Did Fredrick get his wish? Did he get to see an alien up close? Did they take him back to the stars? Or who knows? And we may never know. I don't know. Number 2, Travis Walton. Alien abduction stories can be a little much sometimes. I'm sure you can agree. Even for those with very open minds, you know, they all seem kind of the same, and usually you can poke holes through them and find all the little weird details that don't add up. Well, take a listen to this one. Travis Walton's story is one of the most famous abduction examples on record. You might be familiar with it before if you study UFO stuff a lot. I've covered it a few times on this channel before because I think it is one of the most fascinating abduction stories. So let's hear it. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger on an otherwise unremarkable day. And he was with 6 other loggers driving around in the forest when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed that it looked like a flattened saucer. Walton stepped out of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that had knocked him backward. This startled the rest of the crew, who drove off in a flurry. And it's a great way to find out who your real friends are. Your real friends are not the guys who will leave you in the woods where you're about to get abducted. I wouldn't do that to you. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Travis awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because suddenly he found himself in a blindingly bright, sterile room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he realized something was very wrong. 3 feet tall, brown quarter-sized pupils, and marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, I think as most of us probably would do, and was restrained by his captors. He fought them off, but was greeted by a tall creature that he said resembled human, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, kind of a Darth Vader deal. This masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room, put a translucent mask over his face, while Walton drifted out of consciousness over and over again, unsure if anything that was happening was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually found his way to a phone and called for his brother-in-law, who panickedly asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days. He was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers, tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked right out of existence, and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was absolutely real, an abduction, and he's maintained this ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you really think this story is fascinating, and you wish you could have seen some footage of what Travis described, unfortunately he didn't bring his camcorder. You can, however, watch a 90s movie directly based off the case called Fire in the Sky. It's on Amazon Prime or something, I'm sure. And finally, number 1, the Berkshire incident. Now here's the thing with most UFO sightings. They're isolated scenarios, you know? One sleep-deprived night watchman sees something weird out the corner of his eye. Somebody up way too late sees something up in the sky. It's hard to believe just one person's story. That's why it's significantly harder to write off the experience of Berkshire County, where half the town reported seeing the same UFO. Uncanny and unprecedented. 250 residents and more all reported seeing the same UFOs flying across the night sky. So it was 1969. Multiple residents across town spotted blinding lights above Sheffield in the southern Berkshires. Witnesses reported that the lights they saw were beaming from saucers, bright lights onto the horizon. Some residents said that they felt that time was slowing down as they watched the object, claiming that it left them frozen and stunned, wondering just what it was they were looking at. One witness comes from a young student, one Thomas Reed, who said that he saw one of the floating entities a glowing orb dashing outside the forest. He claims he heard an eruption of crickets and frogs and a loud deafening sound, and then inexplicably 2 hours had passed without anyone understanding why or how. His mother and grandmother had switched car seats as well. Now, as an adult, Thomas Reed claims that over time his family has corroborated what had happened to them. He speaks of being in this immensely large, almost infinitely spanning metal hangar with hallways and hallways stretching out forever. Thomas Reed took a polygraph test telling this story and was found to be 99.1% truthful. Multiple people across Berkshire that day reported similar stories: balls of light, flying saucers, losses of time, finding themselves somewhere they couldn't explain. The residents of Berkshire may never get to the bottom of what happened there, but I know the truth is out there. And I know Top 5 Scary is gonna find it, I'm pretty sure.
Number 5. Hypnotic regression. Many people who claim to have been abducted by aliens are unable to remember a lot of the specific details of their abductions. Because of this and the public stigma against people with alien experiences, many people choose to never come forward, or their stories are written off as delusion. But in the spirit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, let's talk about a certain woman's experience with hypnotic regression. A woman who claims she was abducted by aliens was put under hypnosis in order to give a documentary crew information about the visitors from other worlds. When asked how aliens are able to travel at such incredible speeds, she responded with the following: "I can't explain it, but it's like if they want to get from one point to another point, they remove what's in between, so they don't have to travel that distance. They are instantly from there to there." When asked why aliens are studying humans, the response was, "They are very wary of humankind. Mankind is progressing technology-wise, and soon he's going to come across technology that will allow him to peel back the layers of dimensions. And they want to know all about man for their own benefit. Man's warlike, aggressive, an animal. He's in possession of technology that is more than he is. There's no balance. And they're very wary that he's now on the threshold of many breakthroughs, one of which is peeling back dimensions. It's like an onion skin. You peel back one layer, and there's another one underneath, and another one underneath, and another one underneath. The same with dimensions. They're scared. Do aliens really study humanity out of a fear of what we will do once we discover interdimensional travel? And if so, how do they feel about all the UFOs we have apparently shot down? What do species historically do with groups that they are afraid of? What fate awaits the human race at the hands of these interplanetary visitors? Number 4. Sam the Sandown Clown. Our next story comes from the January-February edition of the British UFO Research Association Journal and concerns an anonymous man going by the alias of Mr. Y, who claims that one October night in the year 1970, he was driving to visit a friend when he saw something hovering over the swamp to his right. It was a huge UFO with several different multicolored orb-like lights brightly illuminating the craft. He got out of his vehicle to observe the craft for a moment and then continued on his way. He looked out his window and realized that the craft was now following him, its lights spinning. Mr. Y got to his friend's house, and the friend was amazed at the guests that had followed him there, before disappearing into a nearby tree line. For years, Mr. Y would see the red orbs following him from time to time, watching him and stalking him. Doubting that anyone would believe him, he kept these encounters to himself until 1973, when his 7-year-old daughter Faye and her friend were playing near Lake Common Road when they heard an eerie wailing sound. They followed the sound to a nearby meadow, and the wailing stopped. They walked over a small bridge when suddenly a blue-gloved hand with 3 fingers appeared from under the bridge. They looked in the small river and saw a strange figure standing in the middle holding a book. He was described as being 7 feet tall and without a neck. He was wearing an odd and tattered costume consisting of a green tunic with a red collar, white pants, and a pointed hat with a black ball on top and 2 antennae. He had a pale white face, lips that never moved, red hair, and triangle holes for eyes. The children watched in shock as the figure hobbled over to a strange metal hut. Not long after, they saw the figure again as he wailed, and then spoke into a microphone asking if they were still there. He then communicated by writing in his book, saying that his name was Sam. They asked if he was a man, and he said no. They asked if he was a ghost, and he said, "Well, not really. But, in a way, I am." He said that there were others like him and that he was afraid of being attacked by humans. He invited them into his metal hut, which was filled with wooden furniture and elaborate knobs. The children hung out with Sam for an hour before leaving, and a year later, she told her father about the encounter, telling him that there had been men nearby fixing a post who had acted as though they could not see the strange creature. He had trouble believing her, but he had had enough experiences with aliens of his own that he had to consider the possibility that it was real. Did Mr. Y's daughter really see a strange alien in the woods, or is this just the overactive imagination of a child? In an age where spacecraft are being seen all over the world at an alarming rate, we really can't rule anything out. And what of the UFO stalking Mr. Y? What were they hoping to see, and why was he selected to be the subject of their curiosity? This mystery will likely never be fully unraveled. Number 3. Aliens take a baby. Our next entry comes courtesy of phantomsandmonsters.com and describes a 14-year-old visiting the home of some seniors and seeing something more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. As they themselves told it, I witnessed an alien abduction back in 2002 when I was 14. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and rode my bicycle to their house. I got there and clouds appeared, so I decided to make this a pretty quick visit. I set up the computer and installed some software for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 6 years old, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. It was odd, as all the doors and windows were shut. The grandparents looked towards the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray alien creatures, with thicker necks than usually described, with the eyes closer to the sides of their heads. They wore silver jumpsuits. In between them was a taller creature that looked like a humanoid mantis, wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room, and a minute later returned with the robed creature, carrying the granddaughter in its arms. It's looking at me, and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. The grandparents were looking at them too, but not doing anything. I thought, screw this, and fought off all the fear I could and clumsily charged towards them. I didn't even make 3 steps before the grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden, a light stretched around them and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back," soon I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle home as fast as I could while looking back, hoping that nothing was following me. I didn't sleep that night after I got home. The next day, I told my friend what had happened, and she told me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The granddaughter was brought back after a few hours. Not long after I witnessed this incident, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claimed to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit. Why are aliens taking babies away from their families? What are they hoping to learn? And is there some way to stop them? One can hope, but it seems unlikely. Number 2, dream or abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, in July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body, like I was drugged with something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put the tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders, and they don't have fingernails. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks, so small and thin it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in the chair with my head and jaw held by something so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there, but then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum. In a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up a screen like a hologram. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. He spoke with a gray person on the holo screen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. This man was obviously military of some sort, judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holo screen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and next thing I know, I fell on top of my bed with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Was this a real alien abduction or simply a horrible nightmare? Typically, I would think it was merely a bad dream, but the user describes extreme pain in his throat for days afterwards from the tube being forced into him. What was the source of this pain if it was simply a dream? Truly a strange encounter to contemplate. Number 1. The alien and the bassinet. Our final story is another from phantomsandmonsters.com about a woman who was asleep in bed next to her baby's bassinet before waking up and seeing something that would make any mother panic. The following is an excerpt from her account. "I turned over on my side, facing the bassinet, and noticed a bright light coming in between the window blinds. I thought out loud, is it morning already? The light was coming in between the blinds and it was so bright, but the rest of the room was dark. There was also a bright light on the wall next to the window, and I looked up to see where the light was coming from. To my horror, just above the bassinet was an alien's gray face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was dark in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, and there was a small slit for a mouth. The nostrils were small, but the eyes were large and almond-shaped and very shiny black. It had some sort of glass lamp on the top of its head. The light on the wall was projected from the lamp. Then I noticed that the being was looking down at my baby daughter. Oh my god, I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard that I started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me and realized I was looking at it. The being moved towards me and I started screaming and swinging my arms. I remember that I screamed out loud for it to leave. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face, and then in a dreamlike manner, I heard a cooing sound similar to mourning doves. I had the feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. The woman then describes waking up with a sore spot on her head and the alien being gone without a trace. She insists it was not a dream and that she really saw an alien creature that she believes will one day return. For her sake, let us hope it was simply a dream. Did these people really experience alien encounters, or were they simply mistaken, delusional, or lying? Have you ever seen an alien? The dark forces that run this dimension want to know, and ask that you let us know in the comments below, and they recommend you like and subscribe. I'm off to try and make contact with extraterrestrials who might be able to rescue me from this dark dimension and return me home. If I should fail, perhaps I will see you again soon, and I can regale you with more tales of the macabre and the disturbing, here on Top 5 Scary Videos.
Number 5. The Camouflage Cloud. Alright, truth seekers, our first clip up to date comes to us from Instagram, and I know, but hear me out first before you discredit it and watch this clip and then tell me what you think. User the UFO God, and look, maybe it's just the name, but I'm inclined to trust them, posted this video recently, and it's been illuminating. In the video, we can see something in the clouds moving, or rather, the clouds themselves moving in a way that almost makes it seem alive. If anyone out there has seen Jordan Peele's Nope, that's the first thing that I thought to watching this clip, and mostly why I wanted to include it in this video. It brings up an interesting thing to consider. We tend to only think of UFO sightings as little black boxes zipping up through the sky, carrying passengers from another world, but what if the UFO sighting was the alien itself? You know what I mean? You follow along? An organic, non-humanoid entity capable of changing shape in ways that our little primitive human brains just couldn't comprehend. Look, I know I'm mostly summarizing the plot of Jordan Peele's brilliant Nope here, but it's an interesting thing to crunch on, and when you're watching this clip, it's hard to think of anything else. I mean, look at the way the cloud moves. It definitely doesn't look like any cloud I've ever seen. And what is there to suggest that extraterrestrial life will fit in neatly into our idea of what they should look like? I mean, we think of flying saucers just because that's what pop culture tells us, but it could be anything, really. There's also the possibility that whatever we're looking at is some incredibly advanced cloaking technology masking a craft. I mean, invisibility cloaking isn't as sci-fi as you think. Prototypes for cloaks are being developed by militaries around the world today. Let me know what you think of this footage down below in the comments, because it had me scratching my head and rubbing my my chin making all kinds of hms and ha's. And if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more UFO content and wild speculation, well, I have got some great news for you, my viewer. I've got loads of UFO videos and I've got tons of vague speculating from yours truly. All you gotta do is hit subscribe. Number 4, Area 51. Our next clip comes to us from Nevada, specifically near Groom Lake. If you're not super familiar with the geography of Nevada, and why would you be unless you're from there, if I told you that Area 51 is located right on top of Groom Lake, would that catch your attention a little bit? You know, the top secret government black site that technically doesn't exist. The infamous base said to be home to all manner of extraterrestrial activity. That's enough run-up, I think. Let's check out the clip. Now, anything coming out of Area 51 is already pretty suspect. But this is really weird. In the video, we can see a series of flying lights hovering high above the desert dunes. Bright lights in the desert sky is one thing, but in the video we see what looks like them forming together. A series of lights merges together to become one larger one flying around. So what could it possibly be? Drones flying around? Voltron? Now drones seems like it would be the most likely answer if it was anywhere other than Area 51. I'm just saying. Whatever's happening here has to be a top secret. Could this be experiments with technology recovered from beyond the stars? Now there are countless conspiracies surrounding Area 51, but one of the most recurring and popular ones is that it's where UFO technology is stored and reverse engineered to develop new technology and systems for the US military. Perhaps even pilots could be trained to fly alien craft. Whatever's going on here, the likelihood of us ever finding out is next to impossible. If you've seen our video on Area 51 secrets, you know that they keep everything wrapped tight as a knot down there. Nothing they don't want you to see is making it out of that base. That won't stop us from trying to get a good look. Number 3, bizarre light patterns. Now our next sighting comes to us from the stars themselves, specifically during a live stream of the ISS, the International Space Station for the uninitiated. The stream is simple enough, a live stream view out of a porthole of the space station, offering a round-the-clock look at the stars. It's relaxing and fascinating, and I recommend you check it out. But it's also a window of opportunity into a world of unexplained phenomena. One astute viewer was watching the stream late at night when they saw something incredibly bizarre. Watch the footage, I think you'll know exactly what I mean. We can see a cluster of lights moving bizarrely across the screen in a pattern all in unison together. Now this camera is pointed downwards towards the Earth, so some commenters have suggested that possibly what we could be seeing is intense lights shining up from the Earth herself onto the night sky, and while the realist in me can see where they're coming from here, the paranormal investigator in me is fascinated by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this is something a little bigger than a weird light pattern. Maybe someone in the comments who knows more about lights and stars can help me out with this, but to me, this cluster of lights moving seems like it's something, man, you know? Could this be another example of extraterrestrial cloaking technology? It's far from the first time astronauts have reported seeing strange things up and around the ISS. I have to imagine the International Space Station is probably a hotspot for extraterrestrial activity. I mean, aliens coming to Earth is one thing, that's on our territory, but our big station up in the stars, that's their neighborhood, that's their backyard we put that up in. I'm sure they want to come out and see what that's all about. I wonder if aliens see it as like a funny little tourist destination to check out. Take some photos with. Who knows? Number 2, Lieutenant Gorman's UFO dogfight. Now not much happens in North Dakota. Fargo is probably a lot more known as a Coen Brothers movie and a slept-on FX series than it is known as a town where anything of note happens. Unless of course you count the occasional UFO sighting. In October of 1948, Lieutenant George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard would make history and inspire theories for decades when he claims he got into a dogfight with an alien craft. He was flying above the town of Fargo, North Dakota, when he saw what looked like an aircraft about 500 feet below him. He radioed into air traffic to try and ascertain what it was he was looking at, and was shocked to hear back from Mission Control, who told him, well, there shouldn't be any other planes in that area. Naturally, Gorman flew in to investigate. He reported that it was a tiny object, some 6 to 8 inches in diameter, blinding white and completely round, blinking on and off. He says that as he approached this strange bright object, it charged towards him. He pursued it as best he could, but when it looked as if the object was going to crash into him, it shot upwards at a 90-degree angle. He attempted to pursue it, chasing it 14,000 feet into the air, only for it to disappear inexplicably at that mark. Later that night, the air traffic control tower reported seeing that exact same bizarre light at the airfield. Gorman touched down and told his superior officers that he had no idea what it was he encountered, but that he had reason to believe that whatever he was pursuing had thought behind its movements, that it seemed to be making decisions, conscientious choices, and it was reacting to what he was doing. Lieutenant Gorman would live out the rest of his days fairly normally, but no doubt in the back of his mind, he must have always wondered just what it was he encountered that fateful night. Number 1. Tic Tac sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, you probably already knew about this, but I'll never stop banging on about this because it's the craziest thing that's happened in years. The Pentagon publicly revealed that they've been tracking UFO development for years, putting some serious weight into the UFO discussion. Besides doing more to legitimize UFO discussion than anything else, like ever, it also provided us with a bevy of sightings from government agents to pull from. In 2004, a pair of Navy pilots tracked a series of UFOs for weeks on end. According to their reports, these objects would appear suddenly at about 80,000 feet in the air and then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, eventually stopping at around 20,000 feet and just hovering. They would either drop out of radar range or shoot right back up into the sky, which is pretty bizarre behavior. These entities were monitored for weeks before 2 fighter jet pilots were officially sent in to investigate the phenomena. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight, who flew out to try and get eyes on it. What they found would confound the veterans. The men reported back that the object resembled a giant Tic Tac, an unidentifiable white-colored oval-like aircraft about 40 feet long. Far too big to be a drone, and doesn't really sound like any aircraft I've ever heard of. The craft was jumping around erratically, staying just out of reach of radars, but not moving in any one particular direction. The pilots agreed on a rendezvous point to touch down and discuss whatever it was they had just seen, but as they were heading towards it, the UFO flew towards their rendezvous point at a breakneck speed before disappearing entirely. Commander David Fravor said it was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the whole experience had weirded him out. Completely understandable. I think if I ever saw a giant Tic Tac spiraling erratically through the air, it would kind of affect me too. So what do you think? Any ideas at all? Because that sounds like pretty hard proof of a UFO. And that's all for this video, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Number 5. The Navy pilots. Since the release of the UAP documents, the new nomenclature, UFO fever has been in the air more than ever since Roswell. We've got open confirmation that the US government, the Pentagon, is researching actively the possibility of alien craft outright. That's the craziest thing that's ever happened in my life. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher confirmed that 3 recently released videos by the military contain evidence of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Like, that's it! This is the Navy, the government pointing to a video and going, yeah, that's an unidentified flying object that we don't know about. They're not saying it's a weather balloon. They're not saying it's stars. They're not outright saying it's an alien, but they're certainly implying it. The Navy agreed that they would confirm the sightings this time because pilots encounter bizarre sightings all the time, but are usually too concerned to report the sightings because of the stigma attached to previous theories about what may or may not be in those videos. Put gently, it means that the Navy felt like they had to comment on this thing so that pilots would feel comfortable admitting that maybe they're seeing UFOs without feeling like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracist. The videos in question include reports from the STARS Academy of Arts and Sciences, released from 2017 to 2018. They feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that appear in the Earth's atmosphere before rapidly disappearing from view. Now, really interestingly here is these aren't the only pill-shaped cylindrical UFOs that have been spotted recently. There were 2 videos from 2015 that came out, and before that, there was a Navy case involving these in 2004, and even on the rest of this list, you'll see a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO in a sighting from the 40s. So this sort of thing does happen a lot. Now, the purpose of the Navy investigating all this stuff, it's more focused on safety hazard and threats of national security, but hey, at the same time, they may not be willing to talk about it so brazenly, but they definitely are checking just a little bit to make sure they are aliens. But they definitely know more than they're letting on. This footage released only makes up a tiny fraction of what the US Navy and other service branches encounter. One pilot, Lieutenant Graves, claims that in his 10 years flying for the Navy, he thinks he's probably encountered, I don't know, thousands of UFOs in his time. Those are his words. Now, who is to say how many of those might just actually be unidentified flying objects, birds, scouts, drones, whatever, but who's to say how many of them really were alien craft from outside the planet? And my friends, if you're looking to educate yourself on the matter of extraterrestrials, UAPs, UFOs, well, you've got to know by now Top 5 Scary is the place to be. I see the viewer stats in the videos. You goblins love when we talk about aliens. Well, if you want to keep loving them, click on through. We've got more unexplained sightings in the sky than the CIA. And if you want them delivered hot and fresh, you can subscribe and get them before anybody else. Number 4. Childs Whitted Case. The Childs Whitted encounter is one of the most recognized UFO encounters in American history for how surprisingly credible it seems. It happened shortly after the Roswell incident, when UFO fever was hot on everybody's minds in the States, and it was showing. The sighting occurred in the morning hours of one July 24th, 1948. The two pilots, one Clarence Childs and John Whitted, were flying approximately 5,000 feet above Montgomery, Alabama on a clear, normal night. Flight was going well, nothing too exciting, but at around 2:45 in the morning, Childs saw something peculiar. He noticed a dull red glowing light above and ahead of the aircraft, and it wasn't even remotely near Christmas, so it wasn't Rudolph leading the sleigh. He told Whitted that it must be a new type of army jet that was flying in front of them that neither of them had ever seen. They wanted to get a better look at it, and in a matter of seconds, well, they would, when the object flew past the right side of their plane and pulled up with a tremendous burst of flame protruding from its rear, and it zoomed upwards and onwards into the clouds. The two pilots described the object looking like a flying cigar with a cylindrical chassis and 2 decks and windows. Besides the two pilots, one passenger on the flight, one C.L. McKelvey, insisted that during his flight he saw a bright streak of red flashing lights by one of his windows. Now, Childs and Whitted were obviously pretty darn confused by whatever it was they'd saw. Didn't look like no plane they'd seen before, and the way it moved seemed technologically more advanced than anything the US Army was putting out in the late 40s. Now, the US Army proper would challenge this account, and their scientists insisted. They investigated the report and said that it was probably just a meteor the pilots and passengers had seen, which almost sounds like it might make sense until you stop and think about it for a second, because what meteor has windows and a glowing red light coming from it and propels itself forward and rapidly goes upward? Most meteors I've ever heard of go downwards. And Childs and Whitted both disagreed with this as well, saying they got a good long look at it and it wasn't a meteor. Whatever it truly was, though, might be lost to history, tragically. Number 3. The Gander, Newfoundland encounter. Our next story comes to us from Gander, Newfoundland, and it happened on February 10, 1951. A U.S. Naval Reserve Lieutenant and pilot Graham Bethune was occupying the captain's seat of a plane flying near Newfoundland, Canada, when he spotted something unusual, massive, and rapidly approaching towards the plane. It resembled a disc. The co-pilot made a report of what he saw, and this is what he wrote. Take a listen. I observed a glow of light below the horizon about 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the water. The pilot and I observed its course and motion for about 4 or 5 minutes before calling it to the attention of the other crew members. Suddenly, the object changed direction at an incredible speed and began to pulsate, changing its colors as well. Then, it somehow reversed its course and tripled its speed until at last it disappeared over the horizon. The report would go on to say that whatever this object was, it came within 5 miles of the aircraft, which was proven later by radar evidence. Now, when the plane had landed, the entire crew was detained by intelligence officers and interrogated. At their destination, pilot and passengers were questioned again by naval intelligence and required to sign full disclosure documents. Now, take this next part with a grain of salt. Okay? Because I only found one source on this. But apparently a CIA scientist confidentially interviewed the pilot, and during their interrogation, he showed him a photo of a disc-like object that looked extremely similar to the one they had seen flying over the Atlantic. However, during the interviews, no Navy, Air Force, or CIA men would ever answer any questions related to extraterrestrials. No one would say the word alien, no one was saying UFO, nothing like that. They were trying very hard to downplay that. So what was it then? Because it sounds incredibly suspicious that the interviewers had a photo of something that looked similar to it and weren't saying the word alien at all. Number 2. November 1986 Japanese Airlines flight. Our next one comes to us from a pair of Japanese pilots. In November 1986, Japanese Airlines Flight 1628 was heading over Alaska. Captain Kenju Terauchi and a crew of 2 others were on a flight making routine cargo deliveries to France. Captain Terauchi saw something that caught his attention when he saw blinding lights flashing off at the left and the right of the plane. Now, initially Initially, he didn't think too much of it. He thought, hey, maybe these are just US fighter jets zipping around. As his plane furthered forward, he realized that the object was flying ahead of him was of the unidentified variety, a UFO, if you will. Tarachi said that it looked like two spaceships had stopped in front of their faces, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt warm in the face, he wrote. That almost sounds kind of pleasant, to be honest. Captain Tarachi described the objects as being cuboid-shaped spaceships with a jet propulsion system that had horizontal lines of circular exhausts clustered around a dark center. The captain had also reported that when the plane had flown by this object, ground communications were cut out and all radar was blocked. Well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Pretty interesting. Well, if you thought that was weird, the FAA would agree with it. That's the Federal Aviation Administration, who investigated the report very closely, interrogating Tarachi for everything they could out of the incident. Now, during this questioning, his co-pilot and his flight engineer, they said that they thought the object they saw was just strange lights, but they did agree that they really couldn't easily explain what it was they saw. In the end, the FAA ruled that what it was light refraction through ice crystals suspended in clouds. A bunch of science words. Sure. Number 1, Lieutenant Gorman. Our number 1 spot on this list is a humdinger of a tale. Now, most of us can only hope to maybe someday see a UFO in our lives, but I mean, maybe if you were like me and you watched Star Wars way too many times and you still ask the hairdressers to get your hair cut like Luke Skywalker, not like anybody I know, maybe you dream of flying an X-Wing through the stars, dodging lasers, getting into a cool alien dogfight. It's a shame none of us can claim we've done that, except, you know, George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard. I don't think anyone would expect there to be anything exciting happening in North Dakota, but one of the best UFO encounters in American history did. Let's take a little listen and learn about it. It was 1948, a year after the New Mexico Roswell incident, while people were still hyper-focused on little gray men and flying saucers. Lieutenant Gorman was flying a fighter jet solo around the skies above Fargo when he saw what he thought was an aircraft around 500 feet below him. He radioed his tower, but the operator told him that there weren't any other planes to be around and that it was a suspicious vehicle. So Gorman told the tower back he was going to investigate the situation and flew in within 1,000 yards to try and positively ID the subject. Gorman said it looked to be about 6 to 8 inches, clear white and completely round without fuzz at the edges, and it was blinking on and off. As I approached, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. I thought it was making a pass at the tower. Gorman then said he thought the light charged at him. He didn't want to be the first pilot to crash into a UFO, so he readied himself to avoid it, but found the object suddenly shot straight upwards in the air, directly above him, and then disappearing into the clouds. Gorman tried his best to pull up to follow along, but his plane went into a stall while he was trailing it, and the entity had vanished. Back at the air tower, 2 traffic controllers reported they also saw a light flying above the airstrip they couldn't explain, and weren't present on any flight logs. Gorman was questioned about what he saw, and he said he was convinced that it wasn't just a light, that it moved too naturally, that it moved like it was reacting to his movements, as if it was playing a game with him. He said there was thought and precision behind all its maneuvers. We should ask it what it thought about all of that if Gorman was moving too naturally, reacting to all of that. Number 5, the Roswell autopsy. Perhaps one of the most famous pieces of lost alien footage is the infamous Roswell autopsy tape. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a UFO enthusiast like me, no doubt it's come up before at some point. Roswell was kind of the birthplace of UFO mania, where a lot of the first conspiracy theories and a lot of the public ideas we have about aliens really stem from. If you don't know somehow, the story goes that an alien craft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico, where it was swiftly apprehended by shadowy government agents looking to pull a curtain over the whole thing. Reverse engineered, studied, down to the pilot of the craft, recovered by FBI scientists. Almost immediately after, hushed whispers and rumors of a recorded alien autopsy set conspiracists and enthusiasts' mind ablaze in equal measures. Recorded footage of an alien body being dissected would be undeniable proof with world-shattering consequences, and would probably make for some pretty good ratings. Well, the Fox network would agree with you, because in 1995, the footage was broadcasted on Fox, presented by legendary thespian and #1 guy to trust in regards to human-alien relations, one Jonathan Frakes. The film broadcast was not the true footage of the autopsy, but rather a high-budget recreation to show for a wider public audience what had happened. The director claims he had seen the original footage from the 1947 autopsy, but couldn't release it. He claims that he spliced shots from the original footage into the faked footage to provide some clarity, but didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. And he insists that the video wasn't faked, but rather a reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, despite only being a reenactment, the special effects of the footage are remarkable. It does look pretty believable, believable. It was helmed by industry legend Stan Winston, the special effects warlock responsible for bringing the Predator and the aliens alike. The alien body in the footage was filled with sheep guts, chicken entrails, pig knuckles, and raspberry jam to create the illusion of an alien filled to bursting with foreign organs, and probably tasted halfway decent with a little bit of soy sauce. So was the footage ever actually real, or was it all just cooked up to sweep up viewers on a dwindling TV season? The director maintains always that what he saw was real, he just wasn't allowed to show it, and did his best to show us what happened. There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think. Was he just showing how easy it is to fraud something, manipulate people into believing whatever they see? Who's to say if the true footage ever did come out, we would even believe it? We would probably just dismiss it the exact same way. But if you want to see way more scary footage, real or not, dismissible or provable, we have got loads and loads of that for you to enjoy. So click through, stay a while, and get scared all night long with Top 5 Scary. I'll be here the whole night and in this building. Number 4, Edgar Mitchell. The thing about most alien sightings is that they don't always come from the most reputable of sources. You know, it's usually a random internet post, maybe a blurry shot from an iPhone kind of thing, posted on Reddit with a caption like, "What is this?" Or, you know, it's somebody who was walking home late at night and saw some lights in the sky and didn't know it was a plane. And while I think we should respect the voice of the people and the common man, it'd be nice if we got someone with a little bit of clout to their name. Well, luckily we've got more than a few astronauts who've seen bizarre things up there and are willing to share their stories. Edgar Mitchell is one such man. He stood on the face of the moon before, he helped save the Apollo 14 mission from becoming a disaster, he's the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a lifelong defender and believer in aliens and UFOs. Mitchell claims that he's seen things that prove existence of life outside the planet. First and foremost, he is a firm believer of the Roswell conspiracy, and he insists that all those stories are true and that the military has been hiding the truth behind what happened at Roswell for decades, adding on to say that it was buried, and the military propagated a covert movement to discredit everything that had happened at Roswell, to deter people from taking any news about UFOs and flying saucers seriously, dismissing it forever as tinfoil hat stuff. Mitchell claims that NASA believes the public wouldn't be able to handle the truth. Come on, we're ready. We're ready, we're all ready, we're big enough now to know the truth. It's like the tooth fairy, we're grown up, we know where the quarters are coming from, just tell us. And Edgar Mitchell's been trying to just tell us. In 2004, Edgar Mitchell told a Floridan newspaper that he knew there was a secret cabal inside the American government that took in and studied alien corpses, and that after JFK was removed from office, the group did not answer to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. He was quoted saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is where they are coming from." A shadowy organization existing outside the president's control with insider knowledge on aliens and trying to suppress the public. Did Mr. Mitchell just casually confirm the Men in Black are real? Now, NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, but obviously they would. What government is going to throw their hands up and admit that they have been slicing up alien bodies on the side? Number 3, the first flying saucer. Now, while the Roswell, New Mexico incident was the UFO sighting that really shot alien sightings into the mainstream public consciousness and kind of defined what alien sightings look like, you know, the idea of little gray or green men and flying saucers, it was obviously far from the first alien sighting ever recorded, just kind of the most popular. But not even a few weeks earlier, there was actually another famous sighting, and one that's thought to be the progenitor for sightings of UFOs being thought of as flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold was an American aviator. Unlike most UFO sightings, Kenneth never changed his story once, never made any kind of surrealist, outrageous claims, and stuck to the same story for the rest of his life. He saw weird saucers in the air he couldn't explain. Well, let's take a listen. It was 1947, June the 24th, weeks before Roswell, which occurred in July 1947. Mr. Arnold was flying his private plane over Washington by Mount Rainier. I've never been to Washington, so you guys gotta forgive me. He was looking for a recently downed transport plane that had a $5,000 bounty the US military was offering in exchange for its finding. As he was approaching the summit, Arnold noticed that he saw 9 blinding flashes of light hovering up above. When looking in closer, they resembled ships but looked like discs. Arnold said that he saw them flying in a bizarre pattern, with each position diagonally together, reporting that it reminded him of the tail of a kite. Arnold was an aviation expert and said that the craft seemed far more advanced than anything human beings were capable of at the time, moving at unbelievable speeds. He landed at a nearby airport and told crew that he saw something bizarre he couldn't rationalize, worried that perhaps it could have been missiles being fired at Washington. Reporters interviewed him and he was pressed for several questions, but no one could corroborate or figure out just exactly what it was UFOs he had seen. Arnold was questioned by the army as well, who took his claims remarkably seriously, as he was a fairly respected and reputable man, and there wasn't really the same culture surrounding aliens and UFOs, and as such, his claim was met with genuine worry. No one ever figured it out, but the story of them being saucers, combined with the saucers seen in New Mexico, led to the public perception of UFOs picturing them as saucers for the better part of 60 years, pretty much to this day. Number 2. The Travis Walton abduction. Now, abduction stories can sometimes be a little much to believe, even for those with the most open minds who want to believe. You know, they all seem kind of the same. It's somebody you maybe can't trust driving home late at night, saw something strange, they woke up in a blinding light room, and they got poked and prodded by little gray men. Well, Travis Walton's story is not dissimilar to that. It's pretty out there even by abduction standards, but it's too juicy to pass up, so pop open those ears. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger and was facing a fairly routine day, 6 other loggers and him driving around in the forest, when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed it looked like a flattened disc, a saucer of sorts even. Walton stepped out of the bed of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that knocked him backwards. The rest of the crew panicked and drove away. Huge faux pas, I'll say, leaving your coworker behind after being struck by an alien, but okay, you think you know somebody. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Walton awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because he'd found himself in a blindingly bright room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he knew something was amiss. 3 feet tall, with brown, quarter-sized pupils, with marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, obviously, as one would probably do, and was swiftly restrained by his captors. He tried to fight them off, but was greeted by a tall creature he said resembled a humanoid, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, a kind of Darth Vader looking thing. The masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room and put a translucent mask over his face. And Walton drifted out of consciousness again, unsure if anything was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually finds his way to a phone and called his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days, and he was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked out of existence and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was real, a real abduction, and he's maintained that story ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you think this story is fascinating and you're upset that nobody recorded any of it and there wasn't any footage of what Travis described, well, the tragic news is, yeah, it doesn't exist. You can, however, watch a 90s sci-fi movie that is directly based off Travis's case called Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime or something. It's got Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in it. He's a good actor. Yeah, check it out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The incident and conspiracy at Roswell, New Mexico is one of the most famous events in UFO culture. This incident is considered England's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest Incident. Few other alien sightings can boast this many government witnesses, memos, and strange proof. Let's paint the scene. It was December 26, 1980. Oh, nice and festive and Christmas themed. Surrounding Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England was a series of Air Force bases and US Army personnel. 2 of these stationed officers were John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. On this fateful night, the 2 of them were concerned by shining bright lights that were seen flying above the base, worrying that it could perhaps have been a threat or a spy plane scouting out their location. Burroughs said that he thought the lights looked like a beacon summoning people over, and over 40 people on the base all agreed, reporting seeing the lights and sharing their concerns. So the 2 men were sent over to Rendlesham Forest to investigate. In their official document, the 2 men claimed that they had seen a strange, shining, triangular object that was pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men recognized it as an aircraft from any military across the globe. The craft had seemed far too advanced for anything of this world. Black and made out of a smooth, opaque glass. It didn't appear to have any wings or landing gear or even really any methods of propulsion or exhaust. The men describe it as covered in hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the hull of the vessel all over. Neither of the men could identify the glyphs as anything they'd seen before. Duh, it's alien stuff. As the craft touched down, nearby animals were being driven into a frenzy, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning, communications equipment cutting out. The 2 personnel could no longer call back to the base. Now, not even 2 days later, the Rendlesham UFO was spotted again. 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen hovering above the bases surrounding Rendlesham. This time, the crews came significantly more prepared, waiting and ready for the UFO to make contact. The patrol group had found depressions in the ground, and their Geiger counters started blowing up with noise. And the group had known that they'd come across where the UFO had been, and then, right on time, the patrol saw the same craft flying above overhead, disappearing into the night. Years passed, and we're still no closer to understanding just what occurred those faithful sightings. And we may never know.
Number 5, Mars. The goal of the Mars exploration program is, quote, to explore Mars and to provide a continuous flow of scientific information and discovery through a carefully selected series of robot orbiters, landers, and mobile laboratories interconnected by a high bandwidth Mars-Earth communications network. Okay, yeah, that's great and all, but like, are you selecting which pictures you share with us? Cause we'd love to see what the planet looks like. In 4K, please. I know I would. I think it's funny that we can see an infrared cloud into the vast distances of space with the new Webb telescope, yet 4K pictures, still none of the other side of the moon. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it's a lot closer if we wanted to start there, you know? But Mars is great too. We've all seen the pictures of right angles and impossibly formed canyons and craters from Perseverance to get an idea of what exactly the red planet looks like. Yeah, it's red. And sandy, like PEI sand. But we're starting to see some weirder and weirder stuff from NASA as it collects scientific information up there. Like, say, this potential crash landing site. I mean, if it was a crater, bigger hole. If it was an asteroid, bigger hole. Nope, just this thing that looks exactly like what it'd look like if you whipped a rock into sand. Just kind of skips and, you know? This would happen.
Buzz Lightyear to Star Command, we've crash landed on a strange planet.
I don't know, I'm not saying this stuff's covered up or anything, but like, I feel like if we have the equivalent of a bad garage door security camera, you know? Doing like a long 345-degree shots and only showing us more sand. This thing could be in the Gobi Desert for all we know, we'd never know the difference. Show us the bases, where's the monoliths? Also, one lens? One lens? Like, where's the X-ray, the infrared, radio waves? Let's go, people. We've all played No Man's Sky. Where's the 4K and the jetpacks, dude? Number 4, Paul Hellyer. Okay, now on to some more scary stuff. Hey, also, if you dig the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, or comment down below. Do you think they're releasing this late report to Congress or what? Just kinda hoping everyone forgets it's due and just moves on? Anyway, flying on up to Canada, who's been involved in UFOs for a very, very long time. The RAF and RCMP have been on top of this stuff, I'd say even before the Americans. Paul Theodore Hellyer, August 1923 to August 2021. First off, rest in paradise, sir. This man has done more for us up north than we'll ever know. This man has and will play a huge role in the UAP phenomenon as a whole. I encourage you all to look into Paul here a little bit deeper. An engineer, a politician, writer, commentator. He was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. In 1967, Hellyer inaugurated a UAP landing site in St. Paul, Alberta. The town built it as a Canadian Centennial Celebration project, as a symbol of keeping space free from human warfare. In 2005, Hellyer made headlines by publicly announcing that he was a true believer in the existence and was an invited speaker at the conference in Toronto where he shared that he had seen a UFO during his career. In 2007, Paul was demanding world governments to disclose alien tech that could be used to solve problems of climate change. Hey, that's pretty cool. In an interview in 2014, Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for the last 1,000 years, with most of them passing by from another star system, and of course, those living with us on Earth from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moons. Awesome. Just for some credentials here, Paul ran for the federal election like 12 times. Yeah, Air Force, Navy, former Minister of National Defense. Guy was 98, people. Do some homework. He's easily the highest ranked true tinfoil hatter we know of. 98 years that man graced our planet. I wonder what he knew. Number 3, government. Speaking of disclosure and how we're all kind of right in the middle of it, right now, we go to Congress. It's odd because we obviously joke and have a good time and make light of the whole situation, but like, whether you like it or not, it's happening. First off, I'm scared. I'll admit it, I'm scared. I scared my stuff into this stuff. I discovered John Greenwald in like the 9th grade and it's been rabbit holes ever since. Let me tell you. When Congress starts talking about other planets and aliens, it starts mocking up some public citizen hearings with ex-Congress members. It's starting to get a little scary. But these public hearings, they whip this bad boy out. The cream of the crop UFO video that they say they have. The portrait mode, the 4 seconds of a circular something. Like, that's it? Apparently it's taken from the cockpit of a US fighter jet. May 17th, 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counter-Proliferation held Congress hearings with top military officials to discuss the reports of UAPs. Did you miss it? Yeah, it was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yeah, really important stuff. Also, how come they put like the grainy 90s filter on the video? Dude, like we make videos here, we're not gonna notice that? This thing's grainier than the first episode of the Golden Girls. The first public Congress hearing in over 50 years, and this is it. Again, there's some mock citizen hearings that were way more convincing and way more informative from way more reliable personnel. Also, better quality. Interesting, huh? But again, why wasn't all this shared when it originally happened? The government says, yeah, there's like 14 things we can't explain, yet try and solve the easy ones. Apparently there's like 144 more classified videos to just rummage through. It's been a big month, I will say that. 16 candidates for the new UAP NASA program, report late from Halloween, weather balloons, airborne clutter, foreign surveillance. What are they going to tell us this week? Number 2, Dave Foley. And we come to yet another great Canadian, Mr. Dave Foley. Those of you who aren't familiar with the North and what we produce up here, Dave is a Canadian actor, comedian, director, producer, and writer. He created Kids in the Hall, a Canadian gem, and also an avid believer in the phenomenon. He took to Twitter a couple months ago and caught the attention of many. Foley tweeted, quote, "After years of interest in the UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently, at great speed, hovered and pulsated with light." End quote. Now this ship does look a lot like what we've seen in the past reports, so who knows, Dave may actually have seen a UFO. Maybe these aliens are just fans of A Bug's Life. Guys flick, man. Maybe they just want an autograph, I know I would. He continues online, quote, "Many people who have encountered the phenomenon are afraid to discuss it because of the thoughtless and uninformed derision it inspires. Many who discuss it have had their lives ruined by that derision." I should point out, the white lights were on the front of the craft, assuming it was moving forward, and those lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. We felt like our emotions were being tamped down. We were unnaturally unresponsive to what we were seeing. In a way, I'm still experiencing that. End quote. Hey, it's all fun and games when the celebs get involved, isn't it? But up here, Canada's been involved for a long time. More publicly, too. Just last week, a report said that Canadians were briefed last year on what's what with the phenomenon. A document released a couple days ago say the February briefings were delivered by multiple members of the Pentagon UAP task force, and attending was 10 Canadian defense officials, including the Royal Canadian Air Force and military intelligence. Right? Like, not just comedians and sketches, you know? These people have been around a while and read some stuff. Paul Hellyer type stuff. And number 1, Tom DeLonge. Come on, this is an easy one. And probably the most confusing yet reliable source of them all? I know, trust me. Blink-182. "Hey mom, there's something in the back room." Well, there actually could be. Remember enjoying their song Aliens Exist before believing that aliens actually exist? Yeah, the lyrics hit a bit different now, don't they? Cut to 2017, former Blink member Tom DeLonge, now the co-founder of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Sounds fun, right? Until you see the panel. Military generals, astrophysicists, psychologists that have been studying this stuff since the 50s. It's the real deal. But how can a rock star be the head of this phenomenon? Well, he's into aliens, and that's an understatement. Susan Gao, the Pentagon spokesperson who made the public statements on disclosure, said that the Navy had confirmed that those 3 videos that are so wide in circulation are authentic recordings made by naval aviators. And guess who got all those out to us? Quote, "Everyone still looks to the United States government as having all the resources. We've been waiting around as scholars and researchers for many decades, hoping God that one day the government would come to us on what this is. This whole thing could be answered by the government. We're just waiting for them to come help us out with some of the research. This situation that happened is what we've been hoping it would do, so it can ignite more intellectuals to get into this race and help us figure out more about it." End quote. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Physicists, astronauts, that's who we want to hear from, you know? And just for dessert, here's what Tom posted on his Instagram. You tell me what's up.
Number 5, the uninvited house guests. Our first tale of the day comes from a woman in South Australia who was having a boring and typical day, getting the cleaning done and just generally living her life, when she suddenly found that she was not alone and that there were strange creatures unlike anything she had ever seen in her home. This is her story in her own words. "I don't wish to give my name. I was a teacher in South Australia for many years. In 1976, I was hoovering my sitting room floor at about noon. Suddenly, I felt quite ill and thought I was going to be sick. So I sat down on the sofa to see if the sick feeling would subside. I then saw that I was not alone. There were 3 strange little people standing alongside the sofa, just looking at me. I froze with fear, as I had never seen anything like them before, not even in films. 2 of them were short and fat, about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, with broad faces and enormous black eyes, but with only a hint of where a nose or mouth might have been, almost like a pencil drawing. They had wispy bits of brown hair at the back of their heads, and they were wearing brown shrouds or robes. These beings, I knew instinctively, were the workers. The other being was female, thin and about 5 feet tall. She wore a black shroud and had black wispy hair at the back of her head. Her face was very elongated, with huge, dark, piercing eyes. Like the others, there was just a hint of where a nose or mouth should have been. The thin one started to speak to me with her mind and told me I was to go with them. I said in my own mind that I would not go. Somehow, this telepathic communication seemed perfectly normal at the time, and I felt quite comfortable communicating like that. I was very frightened, but I could still communicate and understand. I was so frightened because it seemed they were pulling me away with their minds. I had to struggle to resist them. At one point, I remember falling down and trying to crawl towards the door. I must have fainted or something, because I have no memory from that point onwards. When my husband came home at the usual time, I realized that I had lost about 4 hours. I still have no explanation for this experience. Did this woman really do psychic battle with aliens in her living room? Or did she simply suffer some kind of temporary insanity that caused her to hallucinate and lose time? Regardless of the answer, the experience caused her to feel true terror almost beyond description, whether the cause was real or not. Number 4. Honk if you love alien Jesus. Next up, we have a minister who believes that he is in contact with strange aliens who are dedicated to spreading the word of love and peace throughout the universe. As he put it, "I wish to remain anonymous because I am a minister of the Baptist Church in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and some people might think that what I have experienced is against religion. I have had 3 meetings with humanoid beings from the planet Koshnak, located in the vicinity of the constellation of Orion. Their vehicles can travel in space and can also somehow pass through our planet. These beings appeared to me to have melon-shaped, completely expressionless faces, with thin lips, tiny noses and ears, and extremely large eyes without pupils. Their eyes are green, with scintillating flashes. Their expression in the eyes is intense. They always seem friendly. One of them is called Ohenesto, and he is the one who mainly communicates with me. This is a kind of telepathic communication. He tries to explain complicated ideas of time and space to me. He has told me that they travel in the 7th and 8th dimensions, which are unknown to Earth humans. These beings are aware of 13 dimension. Their lifespan is about 800 to 1,000 of our years. They can continue life forever with only one cell of their body. They are beings of other dimensions, of other worlds, but they are not gods. From time immemorial, teachers of light came to our planet from other planets, from other systems, even from other galaxies and realms, known to us as the non-physical or supernatural realms of existence. Great companies of light came into incarnation on our Earth, carrying with them the message of truth and love and light. I believe that our Lord Jesus Christ is one of these beings. Number 3. Alien Dance Party. Next, we have a rather strange tale from a man who claims that when he was young, he was transported to a pavilion filled with aliens who were having an intergalactic sock hop. Is this truth or madness? I'll let you be the judge. When I was young, I had some very strange experiences which affected my entire life. This was in the 1930s. In 1935, I had pneumonia, which in those days was a dangerous and sometimes fatal disease. One evening, right at the dark, 2 beings came to the window in an elongated envelope. They and their conveyance were like the Northern Lights. They asked me to go with them, and each took a hand. When they touched me, it was like being lightly tickled. Very pleasurable. The odd part was that you could see through them, but they were there, and we talked without sound. They took me to a huge pavilion where couples were dancing. My impression was that the males were dressed in black and white trim. The females were dressed the opposite way. There was no ceiling, but crystals hung above and made music beyond comparison that sounded to me like wind chimes. I had 3 visits to this place in all. On the last visit, a female asked me why I was afraid of the dark. She said to me that both the light and the dark are my benefactors, and they would make them equal. She took a crystal and placed it in the palm of my left hand. For a moment, it resembled the Star of David, 2 triangles. Then it melted and ran between my fingers. After that, my night vision changed. My eyes would adjust quickly so that I could see even when it was pitch black. I recovered quickly from my illness. A few months later, on a camping trip, I found I was the only one awake late at night, watching undulating shafts of bright light. The shafts of light began a strange, seemingly patterned movement. I was trying to puzzle this out when suddenly there appeared my transparent envelope in what looked like an oval cylinder. It just seemed correct to get in. In an instant, I was inside the pavilion again, but the beings were not dancing as before. They seemed to be conversing silently, but not with me. A female asked me to step up on the dais, because I was their conductor. Number 2. The Secrets of the Universe Revealed. This next story features a man who made the acquaintance of an alien race who taught him about the building blocks of our very universe, which was pretty cool of them. This is his story. I am a graphic designer with a good visual memory. What I saw was visually very vivid, but it doesn't make much sense. However, it may have been the most important thing that ever happened to me. In November 1980, my wife and I were driving north of Dundee when suddenly I saw a cerulean blue light pointing at our car from the sky. After that, I have a fragmented memory. We both have a fragmented memory of some bizarre events, but there are a lot of gaps. Basically, we somehow lost about an hour's time. I remember seeing a hairless, tall, man-like being in a blue robe. He was looking at us, inviting us aboard his craft telepathically. His costume struck me as absurd. He was the leader in a blue cape. The cape looked stupid, illogical. He was mentally luring us up to the spacecraft. Somehow, the next thing was, we were on board a ship of some kind, being examined, quite painlessly, by another being wearing a yellow robe with ruffled collar. Also, somehow completely absurd, incongruous. Suddenly, the examination process turned nasty. I felt my mind was being forcibly invaded. I had no control. My brain felt like there was a tunnel that goes through my mind to theirs. Our minds are connected. It could have been a tube or a tunnel of light, gray-brown. It was horrible. It pulled everything out of my head. There was a terrible sound, piercing, high-pitched. My thoughts had turned to goo, but I could see them visually. They had my mind, but I still had it too. Then it seemed as though I was okay again, but I felt completely different mentally. I can't explain this, but there's more to it than anyone knows. There's more to life, more to the world. There's more to everything than anybody knows. More dimensions than things coexisting. There are many more than 3 dimensions. Everywhere, it all works together. Everything coexists. I still can't explain all these thoughts, where they came from, and so on. Number 1. A UFO sighting. To end our compilation, I have selected a story of a UFO sighting. Not really much else to say about it. Let's dive in. My name is John Healy. At the time of making this officially transcribed statement, I was a detective with the Cleveland Police Department. I was also a U.S. Army reservist, training as a flight medic. The incident occurred when I was traveling on a helicopter with 3 other reservists on the evening of October 18th, 1973, about 10:30 p.m. We were halfway between Columbus and Cleveland, near Ashland, when the crew chief saw a red light on the horizon. He asked the pilot if there were any towers around there, and was told there were not. As we went along at an altitude of about 3,000 feet, the light seemed to be growing brighter and brighter. It appeared to be on a collision course with us. It kept coming right at us. The pilot had to put our helicopter into a power dive to avoid it. We were looking right through the windshield, watching this thing, and it damn near came to a stop right over us. It just hovered for a while. We all got a very good look at it. It had a steady red light on its prow. It was cigar-shaped. There were no wings on it. It made no noise, created no air turbulence, shining down out of aft end. It shone down and on us, and you could see a definite cone shape, the shape of the green light beam. I've seen aircraft from PTI-9s up to C-5As, so I know an aircraft when I see one at night. But this thing scared the living hell right out of me. We contacted Mansfield Airport and told them we were almost in a collision with an unidentified flying object, operating at 3,000 feet and 600 knots. Mansfield never acknowledged our broadcast. We tried to get a hold of Cleveland Airport and we couldn't until the object passed over us. It continued to the west, picked up speed, and we lost it over the horizon. We never saw it again. We talked about this sighting all the way back and we just couldn't dope it out. The thing didn't have wings, but at 3,000 feet, you have to have wings to stay aloft. It couldn't have been a dirigible or a Zeppelin because those things don't move at the speed this thing moved. Clandestine aircraft wouldn't operate at that speed at that low an altitude. All 4 of us filed official reports. Did these people really experience alien encounters, or were they simply mistaken, delusional, or lying? Have you ever seen an alien? The dark forces that run this dimension want to know, and ask that you let us know in the comments below, and they recommend that you like and subscribe. I'm off to try and make contact with extraterrestrials who might be able to rescue me. Number 5. A sighting from Colorado. When flying over Colorado, one could expect to see tall mountains, vivid landscapes, beautiful, lush forests, and clear running rivers, all of which are things I miss while being trapped in this void. Something that you might not expect to see when looking out your airplane window is an unidentified flying object carrying visitors from another world. But just because something is unexpected doesn't mean it can't happen. As an airline pilot named Jeremy Corbell found out earlier this year. Earlier this year, Jeremy Corbell was flying over Colorado when he saw something he didn't expect. At first, it appeared to be a shooting star, but this theory was thrown out when it appeared to split into 3 pieces, which then went into a triangle formation. The veteran pilot was so shocked at this that he pulled out his phone and filmed the phenomena. While passing aircraft can often be mistaken for alien ships by people who don't know any better, the fact that this was reported by a pilot who would know if it was simply another plane is very interesting. Multiple theories were put forward, including that the lights were high-altitude reconnaissance drones, but the level of light given off by them disqualified this theory. The pilot described the lights as being unlike anything he had ever seen in his entire career of flying. Over the last few decades, many commercial pilots have apparently seen unusual craft sharing the skies with them, but have been prevented from reporting the incidents by airline companies they work for. Are the airlines worried about their pilots seeming crazy? Or are they worried passengers will be afraid of flying if they know they aren't the only ones up there? Number 4. A sighting from the Southeast United Kingdom. You would think that an entire country who have been obsessed with the tales of an extraterrestrial who travels through space and time in a blue police box while kidnapping their citizens to act as his acolytes for the last 60 years wouldn't be too shocked when confronted with evidence that aliens from other planets really exist. But it would seem that no matter how much fiction one consumes, it can still be shocking when confronted with the real thing. As a security guard in England found out in our next entry. When checking CCTV footage from your work, you may be expecting to see animals or even some light crime. But in July 2022, a man in the United Kingdom saw something far stranger. Visitors from another world. On the screen, he saw a large glowing sphere suddenly appear above a nearby power station complex. It hovered above the station and then just as suddenly disappeared. At first, the man thought it was a flare, but there was no trail showing where it could have been shot from. He continued to look for a rational explanation, checking flight radar to make sure it wasn't a plane or a drone. He went outside to see it with his own eyes, but nothing was visible to the naked eye. He brushed it off until a few days later when a coworker came in claiming to have seen the same light hovering and then disappearing over a nearby field. The workers went back through their CCTV footage and posted the footage online. What exactly did they see in the sky? And where did it go when it disappeared in the blink of an eye? These workers will likely never know and will instead carry these questions around in their heads until the day they die. Number 3. A sighting in Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is a city that would sound like a city in a science fiction novel if we didn't know for a fact it is real. A city where vice and debauchery are encouraged, with claims that no consequences will be remembered once you leave its borders. A flashy city of neon, constructed in the middle of a barren desert. Considering how ridiculous that sounds, and Nevada's already considerable reputation for alleged alien activity, perhaps we should not be surprised that visitors from another world would want to take a look for themselves. Proving that what happens in Vegas does not always stay in Vegas, we have our next entry. A man and his friend were driving home at night when they saw unusual activity in the sky. 2 large white orbs of light were floating in the sky. As if this were not shocking enough for the witnesses, smaller red orbs began to appear as if coming from the larger craft. These red lights would fly off on their own, sometimes returning to the larger white orbs. The witnesses claimed that over 25 of these red orbs came out of the craft and flew around, which begs the question. Did they see an alien craft or something else? If it was an alien craft, what was the purpose of these smaller red lights? Were they searching for something? And if they were, did they find it? Was this something sinister or simply an interstellar game of hungry hippos? More importantly, why am I asking you? The glowing white orbs reportedly stayed in place for over 5 hours before eventually disappearing into the night. Number 2. A sighting in Sacramento. For those who are more skeptical, it is understandable that you would not be impressed by a lot of footage that is released of alleged alien encounters. It is often grainy, shaky footage that looks like it was filmed on a potato rather than a camera. And oftentimes, one is right to be skeptical. Oftentimes, things can be mistaken for alien crafts when seen through the lens of a phone camera late at night in the dark. But sometimes, people witness the unexplainable in broad daylight. Such is the case in our next entry from Sacramento, California. In this case, a man was in his yard with his family when he looked to the sky and saw a cone-shaped object flying through the sky. They pointed it out to their parents, who were also in the yard, and all of them did their best to capture footage of the cone-shaped craft. It seemed to morph in shape between a cone and an elliptical shape, but when they zoomed in, they saw that the bottom of the cone was emitting light. It is clearly not a plane, and the light coming out of the bottom is curious to say the least. Number 1. A sighting in Canton, Ohio. When working a full-time job, having the opportunity to relax on your day off with a cold drink in the company of your loved ones is something you look forward to all week. While imagining how you will spend your leisure time, you may imagine a variety of experiences like land darts or barbecuing for your friends and neighbors. Rarely do people imagine that they will be spending their time off witnessing an interaction between the military and an unidentified flying object, as is the case in our next entry. On the 10th of November, a man was sitting on his back porch enjoying a well-earned day off when he heard the sound of a military helicopter. The helicopter appeared to be chasing after something. He looked around and saw several small, white glowing shapes moving at high speed away from the helicopter. He grabbed his phone to record what he was seeing, but several of the shapes disappeared before he could record. However, some of them remained, and he was able to capture them on film. While this is impressive footage, the most disturbing part of the story for me is the helicopter chasing them. Were they trying to research the UFO? Or were they attacking them or chasing them away? Whatever it was, let's hope that it didn't result in any tensions between humanity and an advanced alien race. With that, another list has come to an end.